We have a special guest on the program today. Let's welcome in the greatest of all time, Jim Calhoun. Jim Calhoun grew up in a working-class Massachusetts town, Braintree, one of 6 children, raised by his mother after his father passed away when he was just 15. He worked as a gravedigger, a granite cutter, in a shampoo factory before getting another shot at college basketball. And he made it count. He built a high school dynasty from scratch, elevated a small Boston program to national relevance, then rewrote history in a sleepy regional college town, Storrs, Connecticut. Over the next few decades, his teams would amass 920 games won, hang 3 national championship banners, and fundamentally change what people believed was possible in Connecticut and the Northeast as a whole. The Big East feared him. Players revered him, and opponents respected him, even if they didn't like him. He was one of the just 6 coaches in history to win 3 or more NCAA titles and one of the most relentlessly competitive leaders the sport has ever known. But what you'll find out today is the outside of his accolades. Jim Calhoun wanted to be someone who his players could turn to have someone that they could count on and always have their back. So today we sat down with Coach and Dom Amore, longtime sports writer and beat reporter for the Hartford Courant. His new book, Finding Jim's Voice, perfectly, and the players that needed that voice the most. So without further ado, let's welcome in Jim Calhoun. All right, welcome in to the Hoops Cap Pod. Here with the wonderful Dom Amore and the legend Jim Calhoun, talking about this book, More Than a Game. Dom, talk to me really quick about the writing process and how you got connected with Coach and everything that goes with that.
Well, Chris, Coach and I, although I had covered UConn in the distant past, I actually covered the NIT run in 1988, but we really got to know each other in his last season as coach at UConn. That was my first season as the beat writer for the Courant. And, we kind of connected. I think we kind of hit it off. I think we spoke the same language. And, when he moved on to retire and then moved on, came back to St. Joe's, of course, I covered all of those things. So I think we had built up a pretty good relationship of mutual trust. He asked me about doing this book. And, the concerns that I had going in, or the one concern that I had was that if we were going to do a book, that we were doing it for the right reason. Sure. I wanted to make sure that Jim was doing it because he had a story to tell that he hasn't told before, that he wanted to tell now. And that's exactly what he did. He got the idea from a book he had read called The Wax Pack, where someone had found a 1980s pack of baseball cards and went and tracked down each of the 15 or so players on the cards and where they are now and what they're doing and how their careers and lives turned out. And he got the idea to kind of do that on its head a little bit and track down people that he coached, not only at UConn, the stars that you know about, but people that he coached at Dedham High School, people that he coached at Northeastern, and people that he coached right here at St. Joe's, and just examine his relationship with them and how the relationships evolved, how he coached them, how he helped them, how they feel that he helped them, and how the relationships have continued long after they stopped playing for him and they moved on. So we've done that with, I believe we have 14 players, plus Mark Daignault, who wrote the afterword to the book. So we have about 15 players that whose lives were impacted greatly by Jim Calhoun and his thoughts on that, and in some cases, their thoughts on that.
Coach, excuse me, I don't want to exclude my 2 sons who both have letters in there, because they'll see this, and like anything else, they'll get red ass about it because I was part of the process of bringing them into this world, and I love them both very much. And everybody always tells you not what you did, but what you didn't do if they're involved. My two sons are two diamonds I have, and like one with my wife. But the point being is that they always are an integral part of it, because I wanted to be. We're kind of jumping into the subject matter. I always wanted to be a father for a whole bunch of guys that didn't have fathers, as I did when things happened when I was young. I wanted to, and never ever extend more to my players than my sons. I extended more to my sons, but I love my players and love them in different sort of ways, and they had different needs, like we all do. I had needs to coach, and I had needs to be with people. I just came back from Miami, spent a couple of days with Karan Butler and his wife, and when we see each other, I think everybody eats too long, not too much, but too long. And my friends, my wife, they all go out with 2.5 hours, and I'm looking at my watch. And the next thing I know, it's 5 hours with Karan, his wife, who, by the way, is a UConn graduate, and he met her when she was tutoring him, and he needed a lot of tutoring.
Okay.
He was bright as hell. I don't mean that. I'm talking about more like the reality of going to college.
For sure. In this premise of finding, you said 14, maybe 15 players, what surprised you, or what did you learn that maybe you didn't know, or that you, looking back, you're like, wow, I wish I knew that going into it with any of the players that you reach back out to?
Yeah, there's no question that some coach say, well, I knew everything about him. Really? You were there for the 18 years he lived. No, you weren't. So under Dom's leadership and incredible ability to appear at a place and you like him right away. I got him for a much more mercenary reason, is that he's a very talented writer. A guy named Lee Montville, one of the best sports writers who ever lived, recommend I find Dom. I don't have to go any farther than that. I have 2 previous books. Lee wrote one of them. But no, I think, and we'll go through it a little bit, obviously, but coming to find out, well, that was that important to him. The $20 I gave him, the NCAA is going to arrest me, by the way, to get home on a bus. As simple as that. Or in high school, I'll just give you a quick story. John Kavalowski, never heard of him. He's number 3 at NASA. Played for me, and we're at Sam Jones basketball camp. At the end, Sam, like all coaches, have all the 300 campers sit down, and John got a sportsmanship trophy, 6'6" kid, played 3 sports. Was a good player. Anyways, with that said, John always had talked about MIT. It's a pretty good place to go, I guess, if you want to be an engineer, which you became. And he walked up to Sam and said, Mr. Jones, can I meet the kid? Because he mentioned about someone going to MIT next year at the roundup speech that Sam was giving. He says, son, it's you. And he's thinking to himself, then. He thanked me a million times then. But I had no idea the effect it had upon his life. He had 2 nice parents, but unfortunately, they didn't come to games because they were 60, didn't know, and that was old then. And secondly, they didn't have a great deal of interest. His mother, by the way, became a Dedham High School basketball fan, Northeastern fan, big UConn fan. So when he found that out, he figured out that the only person that would have known he wanted to go to MIT was me. I had to go over, talk to the coach without John knowing. And he said, I'm going to apply. I hope I get accepted. I looked him in the eye and said, you'll be accepted. Don't worry about it. I said, I'm not on the admissions committee, but you'll be accepted. Obviously, he was. Got there, got his degree. Then he went to, I believe, Stanford and got his master's degree. Went to Cal Berkeley, got his doctorate, and then he taught there for a while, and then joined NASA 20-some years ago as either number 2 or 3 So I called him on the phone recently and said, John, how you doing? I said, Coach, I've got a car in my hand that flies. Now, when anybody told you that, you think they were drunk or crazy. He did have a one in the car in his hand. I was inviting him back here for dedication to the gym. And so but I found out what it really meant to him. He started crying, and I started crying. And we're talking about 1971, too. I coached him. And we're crying in 2020. I think that dinner was 3. And I love him. Obviously, he represents me, the town, everything else good. And my wife said, I can tell when you talk to one of your players, there's an upper about you, how you feel and how they stimulate you in the sense of how you feel. Well, that's one of the reasons having Dom, and I know that he doesn't use the same language I use, and that's only for the games. I put that away. I never use that language any other time. He got my voice.
Yeah.
He got my voice. And I'm not, and I thank God, and the bad things didn't rub off the voice he got. And I could hear myself. He interviewed me day, a week after week after week with each kid's response. Emotional, and he knows this, but I haven't really gone in great depth. The way he brought it in and the way I felt, reading the responses that Dom went out and got for people. Danny Hurley, for example, the coach at UConn now, does our forward.
Yep.
Mark Daigneault, who was a manager of mine, he's the only manager in the NBA as a head coach of the number 1 team. He got those guys to respond. I'm sure when we get you that book, when you read about Mark Daigneault, he does 2 or 3 pages, right, Tom, on what it's like to play for me in the game, psychological game. I go to university, and I said, all I got is a master's degree in psych. And my point being is that it's very, very difficult and incredibly heartwarming. And to have my wife, except for a couple bad things that have happened, unfortunate things happen in our life, for her to see me just bawling about one of my kids.
Sure.
But they are my kids. And I make a separation, they are my kids. And Dom, he may not like this, but he's part of the Calhoun family. How I made him Irish is a story I can tell you later.
Yep.
He's a special, special person who, if he was my assistant coach or whatever the case may be, he'd be giving to the guys too. He'd understand that you, for 2 hours, 2.5 hours a day, you beat the shit out of them in the sense of making them the best they can be. And the other one, you had their back. Having the back with the kids I had, it's very important.
Well,
Absolutely.
Jim wants to make me a golfer too, but I think he'll have better luck making me Irish.
I think you're right on that. Dom, when Jim talks about you had his voice, or you found his voice in this book, tell me about that. Obviously, this is as you said earlier, this is a much different type of book than most people probably expected. Because I honestly, just having a quick conversation with you guys here, I didn't know that that was the direction that we were talking to multiple players and people in Jim's life going back to that. How'd you find that? And by the way, great overarching theme of this. I think it's going to be a wonderful read. But how'd you find it?
Yeah, well, it is a unique idea, because Jim wrote his memoirs. He wrote his memoirs with Lee Montville in 1999. And we didn't really need to do that. I mean, obviously we have some of those things and themes are revisited here 25, 26 years later. But I definitely, the most important thing to me, I've never done an as told to book before. My book was in my voice. It was on turn of the 20th century Yankees. 7 or 8 people bought it. But I mean, this is but I wanted this to sound like Jim. I thought some of his other books that he did were very good, but they didn't really sound like him. And, Jim has a very unique way of talking. It's not just using words that maybe the nuns wouldn't want to hear him use. It's things like, a lot of, quite frankly, and my point being, and things like that. And I wanted to make sure, in fact, in the editing process, that they didn't take out a lot of those words that an English teacher might find superfluous, but
Sure.
they make it sound like Jim. And I think they were very gentle in editing it. They just corrected the mistakes and raised whatever questions that needed to be raised. But I think what comes through is Jim's voice. This is going to sound like just like what it sounds like right now, like you're having a conversation with Jim. He drifts a little bit, so I have to kind of rein him in a little bit, get him back on point. But it sounds like Jim. So that was the most important thing for me. And when Jim told me that Pat had told him that, hey, it sounds like you, then I felt like, okay, I achieved the most important thing that I wanted to achieve. Most of the players that I talked to, there's almost nothing that they'd rather talk about than Jim Calhoun and how much he meant to them and what his impact was on their life. So all of that wasn't hard to get at, but I think we got the right questions asked and answered, and they really, reinforced the things that Jim was saying. And in many cases, they told stories that Jim hadn't told me. And so I would go back to Jim and say, do you remember this? And he would say yes. And that was, but the one thing I know that Jim has talked about a few times, Mark Daigneault told the story of becoming a student manager at UConn. He wasn't a player, never played in college, was a student manager. And he was one of a number of student managers. And the first 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, Jim barely even acknowledged his existence, or didn't know his name, or didn't call him by name, etc. And then out of the blue, when they were going to the Big East tournament, Jim put his car keys in the kid's hand and said, "Follow the bus to the garden, and don't screw it up, and park in the garage." And I guess they had a bus driver who was a real maniac. And this kid was from Massachusetts. He didn't know from driving in New York, and so, but he followed the bus. The bus kept losing him. He kept catching up, following him, white knuckled. Ben Wood, who's now the assistant coach at Central Connecticut, was his wingman. But he said he never felt. He felt like the world was off his shoulders when he finally parked this car in the garage without a scratch. But but amazingly, for a guy who's now the NBA Coach of the Year,
sure,
and going for a championship, but to him, so much stems from Jim putting that trust in him. Jim had noticed, even though he hadn't talked to him, he had noticed this was a kid who could be tested. This was a kid who could be trusted. This is a kid who wants to do things right, wants to learn, wants responsibility. So I'm going to give him responsibility. And he gave him this responsibility with his expensive car, and he drove it to the. I'm glad he didn't give me responsibility like that.
Me either.
But he got the car to New York, and it's stories like that I think people will find fascinating that maybe they didn't know about Jim and his effect. And what the expression that Mark uses, Jim puts the wind in your sails because he empowers you, he gives you responsibility, he gets behind you and pushes you to do it, but he pushes you to do things that you don't think you can do, or that you would find daunting if it wasn't for him saying, you can do this, I believe in you, do it. And I imagine that's player after player after player, hundreds of players everywhere that he's coached would say the same thing, that he got them to do things that they didn't know they could do because he trusted them to do
it. I have no doubt that's true. And Coach, off of that, maybe not off of that specific story, but more, what do you think it is about you and coaching in general that you could look at a kid that you were coaching and you could tell kind of how far you could push him? What was there ever a formula in your head, or it was just like a feeling that you knew that this person could handle a situation like with Mark Dagnott or anybody else that you coached, more specifically to your UConn years?
Well, I think the biggest thing, first thing what I said to Mark was don't fuck it up, but that's I know this is not X-rated, and that's not
no, you're good.
That's the way the kids respond to certain adjectives and other things, pronouns and other things. But no, I honestly think I was myself. The greatest bloodhounds you'll ever meet don't have 4 legs; they have 2, and they're called basketball players. And if you're a phony, they take a deep breath and they know, then they talk about you, and you don't get the effectiveness or having them want to win not only for UConn but for you. And a lot of these kids, and they don't. They gave me more than I gave them, but they think they owe me something. What they owe me is by playing for me. I don't have to work. I can live life the way with my family and my incredible wife, Pat. I can do all those kind of things because of those kids. If they didn't trust me, if they didn't come, like, for example, a mechanographer was not in the book. Why, Coach? 3.97. Incredible speaker. Rookie of the year in the NBA. 11-time. Yep. Because his story, I tell him, it's too bland. It's just like, if we all could have a Mecca's life with or without Jim Calhoun, what I gave him, because he wasn't, even though he's from Houston, I gave him street. This white guy gave him this 6'11" guy street. Well, the players obviously and his teammate Ben Gordon and so on, but I gave them street. And he always appreciated that because he needed that to survive. Not as much at UConn, but certainly for 11 years in the NBA. And he's the only thing he did wrong, Mecca, in the story was too good because it didn't tell a story. Was who he married. She is so beautiful you wouldn't believe it. But her dad was a referee in the NBA.
Mm.
And I've sworn off referees a long time ago. I'm just joking. They bored me with when I go to the Big East to speak, they pay me to come down and work for Fox and stuff. And I stay with the officials. And we have stories late into the night. I don't drink. I fake like with them I do. I order a beer, then drink Coke. And someone said, why don't you drink? I don't drink because I know when I get upset. So could you imagine me drunk? And it wouldn't be a good combination. But bottom line is that what Dom was saying, I was a father to them because my dad died at 15. I was a father to them because along the way, my high school coach, my principal, I worked as a stonecutter at 15 when I left a baseball game when someone said to me, hey, Jimmy Calhoun, get home. Your dad's dead. I walked in the house, my sisters, all of them. My brother Bill was 5. Hugged my mother and said, I'll take care of you. And I did. She was a waitress. My dad was an engineer, Marine Academy, etc. And he's the greatest person I ever met in my life. To say it was devastating is the mildest you could ever put it. And I hated God after that for a short period of time. Why would he do that when some other guy is drunk all the time or whatever, misbehaving all the time? And take him, he doesn't want to be here. And my dad loved his kids. He lost his first wife with my older sister and then went around the world 5 times as a first engineer. And so I wanted to be, yet he had a toughness about him that when he walked into a room at 6'3", probably 190 pounds, he wasn't a guy to be trifled with. And the reason I get that line, trifle, a guy named Boyd Grant, who's a great coach at Fresno State and beyond that. And he looked at me one day and said, Calhoun, you ain't a man to be trifled with. And, yet I think I have a lot of passion and love. And what my players gave me, I could never return to them. I'm there for them. And I'll always be there for them, as long as we're all here. But what I did and how I did it, everybody says, well, I just did it. No, that's not true. but I wasn't getting a game plan. I'm not calculating. Last night, and this is a junction off it, I was working on getting a play here. We looked at the hospital. I'm on the board at the hospital. I have the Calhoun Cardiology Center, and the kid is a kid from Senegal, which I had a player for. I'll be able to speak his language because he only can probably speak Wolof or French. I had 2 Senegalese kids play for me, and they have someone look at his leg because he's probably a 6'9" Division I player, and I'm helping another guy out. The kid's only been here a year and a half, and so I continued to do the things you should do. People said, "Well, you don't have to." I don't have to do a lot of things, but I have to breathe. And part, I remember Reggie Lewis, God rest his soul, great player for the Celtics, who died of a heart attack. And early in the process, I was in 22 as a freshman. We had a great team. And Reggie says, "Coach, can you do me a favor?" Very soft-spoken. He wasn't a good kid. He's a beautiful kid, just by his soul and heart. Obviously a great player. And he says, "Yeah, Reg, sure. What is it, man? Can you stop yelling at me in front of the fellas, his teammates?" Reg, man, it's the way I breathe. It's the way I express myself. So here's the calculating part. Went home, drove the car. If I said to my wife, I shouldn't yell at Reggie or use that language around Reggie and so on, she said, "Son, I think that's a good idea." And I didn't do that. I didn't ask anybody about it. I just somewhere made a point of, "Reggie, get off the floor." Trust me, I would have said something entirely different before that. And with other players who need it. Donnie Marshall played 6 years in the league, now on Fox, and has done good. He said if I hadn't pushed him, all I did was push him into the NBA. All you did is push me into about $50 million. He said, in a lifetime career. And so my point being here, there's no doubt in my mind, none, that I operated on instinct. I operated a lot. This is going to sound funny at 83 years of age. Learned all the memories, and I haven't lost one of them, about my dad. My mother's empathy and kindness. Who was your mother? My mother was a little calmed down version of Goldie Hawn from Laughing and of many, many years ago. That neither one you, maybe Dom saw it, but it was a funny show, and she was ditzy in a good way. My mother wasn't ditzy. She was full of joy, even after having a family of 7. Her running it without my dad, the strength in her life, because he was this way. He walked into a room right now, you would, do that kind of thing because it wasn't going to hit you, nothing like that, and so on. But he had presence because he was a special person.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to add, Mark, that there are players here. There are a number of the players that we talked to who didn't have father figures in their life,
sure,
but then others did. Rip Hamilton had a strong father figure. He needed a coach, and as Jim explains, it took him a while to kind of read who Rip was and how to coach him and how to be what he needed. And there are others who needed different things. So everyone needed something different, and Jim, using those instincts that he referred to, found a way to give them what they needed.
There's a player that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention because he was my favorite player. I've had multiple favorite players in UConn history, but I'd say that I relate to him because the physical stature is similar, and it's Khalid El-Amin. And so I don't know if Khalid's in the book, but yes, I have to ask you.
You have to put him in the book.
Yeah, I mean he's phenomenal. I know UConn is we've had we talked to some folks about them making a documentary about him that's coming out shortly about Shock the World, and obviously the '99 team. Just tell me your relationship with him and what it was like to coach him, because for me at that time in '99 I was a high school senior. Okay. And so I looked at him for inspiration because I was a 5'10". I guess I wasn't as maybe chubby or whatever, but I wasn't the typical athlete that I was a tennis player and was literally going for a state championship at that time in Connecticut. And I utilized your run I literally am quoted in the Meriden Record Journal as saying, I lost in the Elite Eight the year before in 98. And I was like, in this year, I'm going to not shock the world. I didn't say those exact words, but I'm going to kind of win the state title this year. And I did. And Khalid was very just like, I just resonated with him, that fire, that ability to believe in yourself, even though people looked at you and went, there's no way this dude can be a Division I basketball player. Give me your thoughts on him just entirely.
Well, he says 6 feet. He probably was 5'10". You're right. During Ramadan, he was Muslim. He was definitely fasting. He'd take the bulky gray Champion sweats and have a grinder sub in Boston.
Yeah.
The grinder stuffed up on each sleeve because he's fasting. It's a funny way to fast. And the reason I tell that story, that's who he is. He's always got a game to play. Went to home, talked to him for half an hour. It was down to us, Kansas, and John, my roommate when I tried out for the Celtics, John Thompson. So I went to the house. He was there for half an hour. Parents were lovely and great people. I mean, great people. And he said, I got to go play a game. I said, I flew out all the way to see you, man. What do you mean you? Well, he and Kevin McHale are considered the two greatest players ever in the history of Minnesota basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Tell you what he was. He was one of the great winners who ever lived. He was an amazing person. When he got here, I had to kind of tell him that, this is not Milwaukee. It's not where you think the places that you're going. It's a university. So we get to pickup games. He's here a month. He was only here for 2 days before he committed and came. And summer school. He is picking the teams. He's a damn freshman with all Americans on his team. And he says, you're there. And they listened. I have no idea how they ever listened. He didn't physically impose on them. He was just Khalid. And my ride with Khalid was one of the great journeys of my lifetime. I learned so much more about what a human being shows sometimes isn't who he is. It's trying to be cool and tough. I don't think he even wanted to know how smart he was. I remember getting him tutored, and the school's getting him tutored. And I'll remember as long as I live the fact that the tutor comes up to me, getting his PhD, I think it was biology, and says to me, I don't know why you have me tutoring him. I says, because he's getting a freaking D. That's why I'm having you recruit him. And he said, Coach, he could write the biology book today. He's an amazing figure that captivated people. Got 2 years in the NBA, averaged 11, was pissed off at Chicago and left and made good money over in Europe. He's coaching at junior college now. Mm-hmm. Not that I stay in touch with these guys, but I talked to him last week. And if he needs a player in Connecticut, I'll help him get there. But your observations is very astute. You really, truly, everything says he shouldn't be a good player. He wasn't a good player. He's a great player. He would have won any place he went to. He would have changed any team. That's what he said to me. I'm coming here to change your team. I said, well, I'll take care of that. He said, are you going to play, Coach? That would be him. He'd be respectful, but try to be as witty as I was, and he's probably in his own sort of way. But it was unique. When he first came here, a newspaper locally, he sent somebody because he had a child while he was in high school. His girlfriend did. And the local paper kept sending a person to get dirt on it.
Yeah.
I don't know what births and having a girlfriend and people having things dirt, but because they couldn't figure him out. He was a complex kid who loved the streets. And as much as he'll tell you that he was in the streets, he wasn't. He had an incredible coach. Bottom line. And the son of a gun could play. I tell everybody the story that in the '99 championship, I had some pretty good players. And then I knew they were going to follow us because they were down. And the best foul shooter of the team was Rip Hamilton. And I said, Jake ball school, put the ball in Khalid's hands. And somehow along, Khalid, I call him Khalid. They always said out when I went to high school, he's our Khalid. And he does that to people. To this day, he's an amazing person. And the biggest thing I had to do about safeguards, you're going to get yourself in trouble. I must have said that 100 times. Get thrown out of here. But he didn't do things to get himself in trouble. He just wanted on the edge of it to appear to be a cool city kid. And he wasn't city. He's so well raised, it's incredible.
And, point out he's one of a number of players that, with Jim's prodding, went back and got his degree at UConn, completed his degree many years after he stopped playing. And that was the conduit to his coaching career. Now he's got what he needs to get coaching jobs. And I know he's been a few places and he's building a coaching career. But again, it's an example of Jim not, when you're done playing for Jim, you're not done being coached by him. I think that's obviously a theme in this book.
Another theme that, from a UConn fan's perspective, of my age, I'll be 44 this year. I grew up and we were fortunate enough to get players, or you were, and you blessed us with this opportunity to watch guys like Nadav Hennefeld and Daron Sheffer. I have to ask about that, like that pipeline to that Israeli pipeline, that kind of whatever that ended up being. Like, I'm curious how that came about. I've listened to a few podcasts, most notably a friend of mine, Matt Edwards, did the Dream Season pod, where he talked about that. So I'm curious if any of the 89-90 is in this book. I'm sure some of it is, some of the players, but I'm just in that theme of those two players in particular with Nadav and Daron. Can you talk about them at all?
Yeah, they would be indicative of what I had to do. So I get to the UConn, and they were at that time kind of 8-9 game is the Thursday game when they okay, now 8 started on Friday, and they almost had found a permanent place there, and that was not the coaching. They didn't know what they were doing. Coach Dom Amore was a great guy, terrific guy, but UConn thought they were still playing the Yankee Conference, and there's a difference between Maine and Georgetown, just so everybody knows that, of Villanova. But I think so. I go to Philly, no chance. Boston, I got a kid to New York. I didn't get a good player from New York for probably 5 or 6 years. So being me, when you said being calculating, I had to think, how am I going to find the resources? Like, TV, always looking for content.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm looking for players. But I'm looking for players I can get. So I went out west a lot. As you know, if you ever went through the list of Donnie in Seattle, Washington, and so on and so on.
Sure.
Well, besides that, I wanted to expand our horizons a little bit. And I said, and I got a German kid, and then I had always wanted to be to Israel. So I flew with my wife, and we had a vacation there for a week. And then Nadav Hennefeld came along a couple of years later. I met some people. When I meet people, good, bad, or different, they remember me. Okay, and they love basketball. It's the number one sport there, not soccer or anything else. There are 10 million Jews, 8 Jewish, and 2 Muslim, and they finally, thank God, got them on teams. Well, anyways, recruit Nadav, who becomes the folk hero for everybody in Connecticut, particularly West Hartford, which is a predominantly Jewish community, and he was handsome. And every daughter was going to be married to Nadav Hennefeld somewhere. And then their own, and so on and so on. But I think the biggest thing was, when they say nothing will stop you, maybe something would have. But it wasn't going to be lack of imagination. Connecticut would never think about going overseas. Never mind going out to the West Coast. And I had like 6 California kids play for me, including captains. And I just had fun on an alternative way to get it done. I said until I was at Japan giving clinics last year that the coolest place I've ever been is Israel. I mean today, I've been to the Gaza Strip. It's phenomenal. I've been there 10 times. I'm on their Olympic committee, still converse with some people. I probably talked to Jerome. Jerome's wrote 3 books now, I believe, and they're amazing books. So in thirst to get more talent and beat everybody else out, because I didn't have the established hotbeds for us. And instead of thinking we're north to Alaska with a Y, they started to realize what UConn was, not only here, but in other countries. When Daron played for us, all his games that were televised were on TV in Israel live at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Amazing. That's amazing. Well, listen, the book is on sale now. Woodhall Press website. You can get it there, right, Dom? If you want to,
yeah, the book is real quick. Yeah, you can pre-order the book on woodhall.com and search for it. If you go to my Twitter page or my Blue Sky page, I have it pinned. You can get to the website there. It's pretty likely I'll be mentioning it in the Hartford Courant once or twice more in the next few months. We also plan to use some excerpts in the Courant, so you'll be able to get a preview that way. But it is available to be bought right now on Woodhall Press, and it'll be rolled out starting during the summer, full release at the end of the summer, and Jim and I will be appearing at events, and we'll be going places where hopefully we'll have some books to sign. So
for sure,
we'll be rolling this out throughout the summer, and I appreciate you giving us an opportunity to talk to your audience about it and tell them what's coming and what it's all about. I think if you're a UConn fan, it's a must read. If you're just a fan of coaching and how they operate, I think it's a must read. And if you're a fan of just sports and relationships and people, it's a must read. It's not strictly a basketball X's and O's book. There's enough of those out there. This is a book about people, because one thing I've always said about Jim Calhoun, he could take a sport he knows nothing about, read a book cover to cover, go out the next day and coach a team and win games with it, because he coaches people. He doesn't coach the game. And he's coached other sports, by the way, and before he got into the college level. So this is a book about people and relationships. Basketball is the backdrop. And, of course, it relives a lot of exciting times for UConn fans and fans of the other places where Jim's coached.
One thing I want to interject a little bit with, part of the whole life of why this has all happened is obviously working hard, the typical things people say. But I'm just a guy from Braintree, okay? Originally, my wife's from Cambridge, and I always kid her and saying, the closest you got to Harvard was where you grew up. Because she's telling me things that I probably don't want to hear, which I should hear. Pat Calhoun may be the best person I ever know. I love her to death, 58 years. But there can't be a more special woman I've ever met in my life. She's always a sounding board. What she'd say after a game, and everybody who knows me know that might be 10 minutes, might be 20, depends on if we won or lost. And she would just lovingly look at me and say, "Are you finished?" And I said, "Well, for now I am." And by the way, and she says, "I love you. Is that more important than the win or the loss?" And I said, "Oh yeah, that's a lot more important." Because she is, in her own quiet sort of way, she's got 3 PhDs in her family. She could have 5 of them. She's so bright. She's so charming. She's the greatest asset. The greatest recruit I ever had, Pat Calhoun. One other thing. My sons are magnificent. Yeah, Dad's really proud of them. He should be. Jeff's played for me. Player of the year in the state. All kinds of scholarship offers. Fortunately, at the end, he wanted to come and play for me, which is good. That's the good part about it. The other part about it, he started to get hurt. His knee just went to Miami for a year, came back, got his degree. He's more like me in the sense of my older son, Jim, would find a key, okay, or find a way or knock on the door. Jeff and I would have no problem with that. We'd just knock it down. That's his personality. The two kids, they aren't kids anymore, who I would die for 1,000 times over. I hope, and I learned from them because Jeff might whisper to me about a player. He never talked about his teammates when he played at UConn. That was that was never going to be discussed. And lastly, and certainly not lastly, my two daughter-in-laws, Jen and Amy, they had a problem in the fact that they would try out. Amy worked at Coach's IO for 21 years, and she was the best hostess we ever had and the prettiest we ever had. Jen was the manager of mine. And the last thing, besides all my friends and all these great people who made this all possible, was my grandkids. Each one of them. Sam is a writer. At first it was kind of looked at negatively by the family. And then the girls. From Emily, who was a teacher, got a master's degree here, by the way. Katie, an incredible young kid. All right. And then Avery, who was an amazing young woman. No, I mean like amazing. I'm going to say a sad story about her in the sense that she's going along in high school, doing great, all-time swing as a freshman, and then walked into her friend's garage and found him hanging himself. Obviously, eventually we had to have her go away for a bit, and yet she has so much empathy for people. She's an amazing, amazing kid, as they all are. Peyton is taking 3 years at UConn, going to law school next year with a 4.0. Why do I say it so quickly? Because she's a very bright kid, and she's very well driven. And the joke in the family is, I wonder where she get that drive from. But anyways, and then Reese, who's on the spectrum, and on a spectrum that she's so beautiful, so wonderful in the sense of as a person. She's funny. She loves music. She knows she loves old, sitcoms and other things. So I'm blessed with a family that I would hope that everybody else has the opportunity to live with. And I'm blessed with the fact that I love what I do. I'm blessed with the fact that the players all came to me and took a chance on a coach early years, but then took a chance and came to him. So being here today, I think the book gives you a feel. Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. And by that, I mean of what it was really like, not about individuals. A lot of my guys could have got in. And I said, remember, you have to be interesting. Because they know everything. As I said, Mecca, phenomenal. I mean, Steve Piper, who's in it, Rutgers coach, we talk only once a week. But Pat says that's not true. You guys go for 4 hours, whether it be about a player, etc. Blessed here at St. Joe's with Rona Frady, the president. John Castine became Virginia's president. I'm just blessed by a lot of people because things that you asked the question and you're 100% right asking it. Did it just happen? No, it didn't just happen. Without the help of a lot of people and people believing in me, I wouldn't have got there. I did help that a little bit. Talik Brown, All-American player for us, obviously, great kid, always said, from Dom, you asked all the lessons I got out of this. He said, when we walked into a gym with Coach, I don't care where it was, 80,000 people, Final Four, or wherever it was, we were fine because we had Coach. Well, I didn't ref the game. Wasn't the timer or score. I was in the crowd. But I guess to the kids, because they all speak a language, and we call it the family. And I don't want to get emotional, but being with those kids, and it's expressed in the book. I mean, Dom said, I just wanted to make it good, make it sound like you. Trust me, he made it sound like me. My wife read the manuscript. But most importantly, what he did is to take me back to a time. 83, last Saturday. And God, I miss it.
Yeah. Coach, I'll let you sit on that for a second, but I really do appreciate your time, because my father, I talked to you about this pre-show, is who brought me into this UConn world. And I asked him, I said, if you had to ask Jim Calhoun one question, what would it be? So before we go, I have to give my dad, Bill Zanetto, a little shout out here. He wanted to ask one question, which is, what's the most gratifying moment of your career? And I think that's a really poignant question without actually even knowing the topic of the book, based off of all of the different people that are in it. What was the most gratifying moment of your career?
No, it's probably not any question. Driving home, 1999, landing at the airport, there's 10,000 people there. Then getting on, remember the crossway was the 384 or something going over there?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't go that way. We went downtown Hartford. People pulling over 91 into Hartford. By the time we get to 84 to make the turn east to UConn, people almost like a parking lot. That's a parking in Boston. That's where you put your car on the side of the road. By the time we got to Hillside going up to UConn, the bus could barely get through. When I came off the bus, holding the trophy, and there's pictures of it everywhere. No moment in my lifetime. I've had sadness like all of us. But the joy I felt for all the people involved in my life. And then I found out something really special. And I see it till today. And that being the joy I brought to the state of Connecticut. It's hard to make 1 million people happy, like 2 million, 3 million. It's hard to make anybody happy. One person. And holding that trophy, getting off the bus. We went to the gamble, and it was packed and all that stuff. So, what's your dad's first name?
Bill.
Bill, the joy I felt for you, I wish you could have been beside me. And if you have a guy like this, you are blessed. I know you know that. But every once in a while, we have to be reminded about certain things. And when you get on his ass about things he does or doesn't do, remember that this is a good man. Otherwise, I wouldn't be on this broadcast. Yeah, Dom's the one that introduced me. But you got to understand, I'm talking about a moment that you probably cherished. Remember, people have been buried in UConn jerseys that I signed. People had a love affair with this particular team. And I think when I go to UConn Medical, which I'm involved with very heavily on the trustees, etc. But more than any other single thing, I kind of always think of holding that trophy, getting off the bus in a sea of people. And that sea expands the entire state. Some great, great things have happened. There's no better women's basketball coach than Gino. And he's brought a lot of joy and greatness to the thing. But you're asking me the most pivotal moment. I'll never forget that moment. It was of great joy. I'm not envious that I don't have those now. The only thing I'm envious of, I'm not with beyond my own family. Obviously, I have my own sons. I'm not with my kids. But the greatest joy was that.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate that. And I know he will too. Dom, thank you so much for setting this up, Coach. An absolute pleasure. This has been just a remarkable episode. I'm super excited to put this out on next week. And thank you guys for coming. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, Jim, can you hold up one of those?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
See, this is what the book's going to look like.
This is what the book looks like. Tell me what I should do?
You're good.
Yep, right there. Perfect.
Okay. And on the back, this is what the publishing company wants.
Modern Textile. Yep. So
that's the code.
Yep. So we, again, we're open for business. The book is for sale right now on the website. They'll be in bookstores wherever fine books are sold soon, and we're willing. So again, thank you for the opportunity, Mark, and as always, thanks to the coach for his time.
All right, everybody. Listen, another episode of the Hoops Cat Pod. Really appreciate Coach Calhoun and Dom we'll definitely get this out to you guys as soon as possible. There it is.
All right. Good luck.
Thanks, Mark.